My name is Willa Beatrice Hammond, and I am 57 years old. If you had asked me 3 years ago to introduce myself, I would have recited my resume like a prayer, like armor, like proof of my existence. Senior partner at Caldwell and Associates, one of the most prestigious architecture firms in Chicago. Cornell University, class of 1989, Bachelor of Architecture, licensed architect for 28 years, award-winning designer of corporate headquarters, luxury hotels, museum wings, upscale residential towers. Featured in Architectural Digest twice, Metropolitan Home once, interviewed for a PBS documentary on contemporary American architecture. Mother of one, widow, owner of a meticulously restored 1892 Queen Anne Victorian in Lincoln Park, worth $2.3 million, that had been photographed for design magazines 3 times. What I wouldn't have told you, what I couldn't have told you because I didn't know it myself, or knew it only in the dark, wordless hours of 3 a.m. when sleep wouldn't come, was that I was suffocating. That every morning I woke at 5:15 in my beautiful house, in my Italian linen sheets, in my bedroom painted Benjamin Moore's silver satin, and felt absolutely nothing. No joy, no anticipation, no sense of aliveness. Just the flat gray weight of another day to be gotten through with maximum efficiency. I would lie there for exactly 5 minutes. I'd trained myself not to waste time in bed and mentally review my schedule. Client meetings, design reviews, site visits, conference calls. My calendar was color-coded and blocked out in 15-minute increments for weeks in advance. I knew where I would be at 2:30 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks from now. I knew what I would be doing at 11:45 a.m. on the second Thursday of next month. Control, organization, efficiency. These were my gods. I put on my beautiful clothes, tailored pants from Fury, silk blouses from Equipment, Italian leather shoes that cost $600 a pair, my uniform of competence, my armor of professionalism. I'd drive my beautiful car, a midnight blue Tesla Model S that I'd chosen for its clean lines and environmental responsibility, not because I actually enjoyed driving it, to my beautiful office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Grant Park and Lake Michigan, and I would feel nothing. I had constructed my entire life the way I designed buildings, with precision, intention, perfect aesthetic harmony, and absolutely no room for error, or spontaneity, or messiness, or joy, or truth. Every element carefully selected, every detail controlled, every space optimized for maximum functionality. From the outside, my life looked like a magazine spread. From the inside, it felt like a mausoleum. This is the story of how a stroke didn't just nearly kill me. It forced me to finally start living. It shattered the beautiful facade I'd been maintaining for decades and revealed the emptiness underneath. It took away everything I thought defined me and gave me a chance to discover who I actually was beneath all the achievement and control. I know that sounds impossible, maybe even offensive. A stroke is devastation, not liberation. It's brain damage, not enlightenment. People die from strokes. People spend the rest of their lives paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to care for themselves. I'm not romanticizing that suffering or pretending that disability is some kind of gift. But sometimes, rarely, catastrophe breaks us open in ways that reveal we were already broken. We were just too busy, too defended, too committed to the facade to notice. Sometimes disaster becomes the thing that finally forces us to stop running from ourselves. This is that kind of story. It began on March 3rd, 3 years ago, a Thursday. I remember because it was the day before my big presentation to the zoning board for the Riverside Development Project. A $200 million mixed-use complex that would be the crown jewel of my portfolio. Residential towers, retail space, a boutique hotel, all designed with my signature blend of modernist, clean lines and warm, organic materials. I've been working on it for 18 months, 70-hour weeks, weekends, holidays. Every waking moment consumed by this project that was going to cement my legacy, prove my worth, justify my entire career. I'd sacrificed everything for this building, missed Cecily's birthday again. She'd turned 31 in January, and I'd sent an expensive gift instead of flying to San Francisco, declined invitations from the few quasi-friends I had, canceled my annual physical, stopped going to the gym, lived on takeout and coffee, slept 4 or 5 hours a night, pushed my body harder and harder because the building had to be perfect. The presentation had to be flawless. Everything depended on this. Looking back, I can see the signs I ignored, the occasional numbness in my fingers, the headaches I attributed to stress, the moments of confusion when I'd walk into a room and forget why, the way words would sometimes slip away from me mid-sentence. My body was trying to tell me something was wrong, but I was too busy, too focused, too committed to the deadline to listen. I was in my office, alone as usual at 9 p.m. on that Thursday night. My assistant, Meredith, had left at 6. My business partner, Keith Caldwell, had stuck his head in around 7 to say goodnight, shaking his head at my refusal to go home. "Willa, the presentation's going to be great. You've prepared for weeks. Go get some rest." "Just need to review these elevations one more time," I'd said, not looking up from the blueprints spread across my drafting table. The cleaning crew had come and gone at 8:30. Just me and my blueprints and my obsession with getting every single detail perfect. Because if it was perfect, it would succeed. If it succeeded, I would be valuable. If I was valuable, I would be, what? Happy? Fulfilled? Loved? I didn't let myself think about those questions. I just worked. I stood up to get more coffee from the pot I'd made at 7 p.m., my 4th pot of the day, probably my 10th cup. The moment I straightened, the room tilted. Not subtly, violently, like the floor had become a ship's deck in a hurricane, like gravity had suddenly shifted 90 degrees. I grabbed my desk with both hands, but my right hand wouldn't grip properly. The fingers wouldn't close, wouldn't obey the urgent commands my brain was screaming at them. I stared at my right hand, my dominant hand, the hand that had drawn thousands of buildings, that had signed contracts worth millions, that had held a pencil since I was 3 years old, and it hung there useless, alien, no longer mine. My face felt strange, wrong. The entire right side had gone numb, like I'd been to the dentist and the Novocaine hadn't worn off yet. I tried to touch my face with my left hand, tried to understand what was happening, but my fingers found nothing wrong. The numbness was inside somehow, underneath the skin. I tried to call for help. "Help," I said, or tried to say. What came out was "Hep, Heop, something wrong with me." The words were garbled, slurred, incomprehensible. I heard them coming out of my mouth and didn't recognize them as language. Terror flooded through me, cold and sharp and absolute. Even through the confusion, even through the strange fog that was settling over my thoughts, I knew what this was. Stroke. I was having a stroke. At 54 years old, healthy, vegetarian, non-smoking, careful, controlled, disciplined Willa Hammond was having a stroke in her empty office at 9 p.m. on a Thursday night, with no one around to help her. I needed to call 911. That thought was clear, imperative. Call 911. Get help. but I couldn't make my mouth form the words to tell myself what to do. The connection between thought and speech had severed. I tried to reach for my cell phone on the desk, but my right arm wouldn't move, just hung there, dead weight. I grabbed it with my left hand, tried to lift it, but it was like trying to lift someone else's arm. Heavy, uncooperative, impossible. A phone. I needed the phone. I managed to knock my cell phone off the desk with my functioning left hand. It clattered to the floor, screen cracking. I slid down after it, my right leg buckling beneath me, my body no longer following the rules of how bodies were supposed to work. I ended up in an undignified heap on the floor of my beautiful office, expensive clothes twisted around me, one side of my body paralyzed, the other side fumbling desperately for the phone. It took me what felt like hours to pick up the phone with my left hand, to unlock it, thank God for thumbprint recognition, to find the emergency call feature, to press the button. Every movement was monumental, exhausting. 911, what's your emergency? Stroke, I managed to slur out. Having a stroke. Caldwell and Associates, 5th floor, downtown. Hep me, hep. Ma'am, you're having a stroke? Can you confirm your location? Yeah, stroke, downtown, Caldwell, 5th floor. Why couldn't I say the words right? Why wouldn't my mouth work? Stay on the line, ma'am. Do not hang up. Help is coming. Can you tell me your name? Willa Hammock, Hammond. Even my own name was difficult. Okay, Willa, help is on the way. They'll be there in just a few minutes. Stay on the phone with me. Are you alone? Yeah, alone. Always alone. The words came out bitter, slurred, true. I don't remember much after that. Fragments, disconnected images like photographs scattered on a table, paramedics bursting through the office door, someone saying, unresponsive on the right side, bright lights, the ceiling of the ambulance, IV bags swaying, a young EMT with kind eyes saying, you're going to be okay, ma'am. We've got you. Stay with us. The hospital, the emergency room, controlled chaos, doctors barking orders, someone cutting off my beautiful theory pants like equipment blouse, a CT scan, the machine whirring around my head while I lay completely still, paralyzed by fear as much as by stroke. Voices discussing ischemic stroke and left hemisphere and clot-busting drugs and time window, and we need to move now. Ben, nothing. Darkness. Either I lost consciousness or my brain simply stopped recording. I woke up in the ICU 2 days later, or rather, I surfaced slowly from depths I don't remember sinking into, gradually becoming aware of beeping machines and bright lights and a profound sense of wrongness in my body. My younger brother Dashiell was sitting beside my bed, his face haggard with worry and exhaustion. Dash was 51, 3 years younger than me, a high school English teacher in Portland, Oregon. We talked maybe 4 times a year, saw each other even less. I'd been too busy for regular calls, too focused on my career to maintain family relationships. Yet here he was, 1,800 miles from home, unshaven and rumpled in clothes he'd clearly slept in. Willa, he said when he saw my eyes open. His voice cracked with emotion. Thank God, you're awake. Thank God. I tried to speak, to ask what had happened, where I was, how long I'd been here, but my mouth wouldn't form the words properly. My tone felt thick, uncooperative. What came out was, what happened? Tried to reach for him with my right arm, the automatic gesture of connection. But the arm wouldn't move, just lay there beside me on the hospital bed, heavy and useless. I looked at it, my arm attached to my body, but not responding to my commands, and felt a wave of terror so profound it made my heart rate monitor start beeping faster. Don't try to talk yet, Dash said gently, leaning forward to take my left hand. It's okay. You're okay. You're in Northwestern Memorial Hospital. You had a stroke, Willie. A bad one. But you're alive. You're awake. You're going to be okay. Willie. He hadn't called me that since we were children, before I became Willa. Before I decided that Willa sounded more professional and sophisticated than Willie. Before I'd rebranded myself for success. Something about that nickname, that remnant of who I'd been before I became Willa the architect, Willa the professional, Willa the perfectly composed widow, Willa the woman who had everything figured out, made something crack open inside me. I started crying. Tears ran down the left side of my face in hot streams, while the right side remained frozen, numb, broken. The asymmetry of my own grief. Hey, it's okay, Dash said, squeezing my hand. You're safe. I'm here. Cecily's flying in tomorrow. We're here, Willie. You're not alone. But I was alone. I had made myself alone through years of choosing work over relationships, achievement over connection, independence over intimacy. And now, when I needed people most, I had almost no one. Just a brother I barely spoke to, and a daughter I'd kept at arm's length for decades. The crying hurt. My face hurt, my head hurt, my whole body hurt in ways I'd never experienced. But underneath the physical pain was something worse. The crushing realization of what I'd done to my life. How I'd wasted it. How I'd spent 54 years constructing an elaborate, beautiful facade, while the structure underneath rotted away. Dr. Sanjay Kapoor came to see me later that day, or maybe it was the next day. Time was strange and elastic in the ICU. He was a neurologist in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of calm, methodical manner that probably comforted most patients, but made me want to scream at him to just tell me the truth. He pulled up a chair beside my bed and spoke slowly, clearly, making sure I could understand despite my compromised language processing. Ms. Hammond, I'm Dr. Kapoor. I'm the neurologist who's been overseeing your care. How are you feeling? Scared, I managed to say. The word came out mostly intact. That's completely understandable, he said. You've been through a serious medical event. I want to explain what happened and what we know so far. Is that okay? I nodded. The movement made my head throb. You had a significant ischemic stroke affecting the left hemisphere of your brain. An ischemic stroke means a blood clot blocked one of the arteries supplying blood to your brain, cutting off oxygen to the tissue. In your case, the clot affected a fairly large area of the left frontal and temporal regions. That's why your right side is paralyzed and your speech is impaired. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body and houses the language centers for most people. I tried to absorb this information. My brain was damaged. The organ I'd relied on my entire life, the thing that had made me successful, was bleaken. How bad? I asked. Dr. Kapoor was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. It's significant, but it could have been much worse. You arrived at the hospital quickly, within the critical window for thrombolytic therapy. We were able to administer TPA, a clot-busting drug, which likely prevented more extensive damage and saved your life. The fact that you were able to call 911 yourself was crucial. Will I recover? The word was so hard to say, my mouth refusing to cooperate. Some recovery is likely, especially in the first few months. The brain has remarkable plasticity, especially when we intervene early with aggressive rehabilitation. But the extent of recovery is difficult to predict. Every stroke is different, and every person's recovery is unique. You'll need extensive rehabilitation, physical therapy for your right side, occupational therapy to relearn daily activities, speech therapy for your language difficulties. It's going to be a long, difficult process. When can I work? The question came automatically, reflexively. Work was who I was. Without it, what was I? Dr. Kapoor looked at me with something like pity, which I hated. Ms. Hammond, right now your focus needs to be on basic recovery, walking without assistance, using your right arm and hand, speaking clearly, being able to care for yourself independently. Work is not something you should be thinking about for quite some time. Maybe months, maybe longer, maybe ever in the capacity you're used to. The words hit like a physical blow, even though part of me had already known. I couldn't work. Maybe could never work again. Certainly not the way I had been working, the 80-hour weeks, the complex design projects, the client presentations, the site visits, the constant demands on my cognitive abilities. What happened to me? I asked, meaning not just the medical mechanics, but the bigger question, why? How had this happened to me? We're still running tests, Dr. Kapoor said, but based on your age and health history, the most likely cause is a combination of factors: chronic stress, high cortisol levels, disrupted sleep, poor diet. All of these can contribute to cardiovascular problems. Your blood pressure was quite elevated when you were admitted. Had you been monitoring it? I shook my head. I'd canceled my last 3 annual physicals, too busy with work to take a morning off for preventive care. The reality is that strokes don't just happen randomly, Dr. Kapoor continued. They're usually the result of cumulative risk factors over time. Your body was trying to tell you something was wrong, and those signals were ignored or missed. He was being diplomatic, but I heard the truth underneath. I had done this to myself. Through years of treating my body like a machine that could be pushed indefinitely, through sacrificing health for productivity, through ignoring every warning sign because the work was more important than my own well-being. I had designed my own disaster. After Dr. Kapoor left, I lay in the ICU bed, staring at the ceiling, taking inventory of everything I'd lost. The list was long and devastating. My mobility. I couldn't walk, couldn't stand without assistance. My right leg dragged uselessly. My right foot dropped and wouldn't flex. I'd need a walker at minimum, maybe a wheelchair. The independence I'd prized above everything else was gone. My dominant hand. I couldn't grip anything with my right hand. Couldn't hold a pen. Couldn't manipulate tools. Certainly couldn't draw. I was an architect who couldn't draw. What did that make me? My speech. Every word required enormous effort. And half the time, the words that came out weren't the ones I intended. I sounded drunk or brain damaged, which I supposed I was. The eloquence I'd cultivated, the persuasive presentations I'd given to clients and zoning boards, gone. My face, the right side drooped. When I finally saw myself in a mirror 2 days later, I looked like someone had taken a photograph of me and stretched half of it downward, asymmetrical, broken, visibly damaged. My career. How could I work like this? How could I meet with clients, tour construction sites, present designs, manage a firm? A work that had been my entire identity was now impossible. My independence. I couldn't dress myself, couldn't shower alone, couldn't prepare food or clean my house or drive or do any of the countless small tasks that constitute adult life. I needed help with everything, and I'd spent my entire life avoiding meeting anyone. My sense of self, Without my work, my capability, my independence, my competence, who was I? What was left of Willa Hammond when you stripped away all the achievements and credentials? Nothing. There was nothing underneath, just emptiness. Cecily arrived the next day. My daughter, 31 years old, a graphic designer in San Francisco, married to a successful tech entrepreneur named Marcus Chen, living a life I'd had almost no part in. We talked every few weeks. Brief calls where she updated me on her life, and I half listened while reviewing blueprints. I flew out to visit maybe once a year, staying in a hotel, seeing her for a dinner or two, keeping everything surface level and pleasant and distinct. Now she stood in the doorway of my ICU room, and I saw the shock on her face when she looked at me. Saw her struggling to hide it, to arrange her expression into something encouraging and hopeful. But I saw the truth. I looked terrible, diminished, broken. This was not the competent, controlled mother she was used to. "Mom," she said, coming to my bedside. "Oh, Mom." She reached for my left hand. She knew instinctively not to go for the right, and squeezed it gently. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Hi, baby," I managed to say. The nickname surprised both of us. I hadn't called her that since she was small. "How are you feeling?" she asked, and then laughed at herself. "That's a stupid question. Obviously you feel terrible." "Been better," I said, attempting a smile. My mouth pulled up on the left side, while the right side remained frozen, creating a grotesque, lopsided expression. Cecily pulled up a chair and sat down, still holding my hand. "Okay, tell me everything. What do the doctors say? What's the prognosis? What's the treatment plan?" I tried to explain, but the words were so difficult. Dash, who'd been there the whole time, filled in what I couldn't articulate. The stroke, the brain damage, the paralysis, the long road of rehabilitation ahead, the uncertainty about how much function I'd regain. "I'm taking leave," Cecily said when he finished. "I'm staying until you're better. Marcus supports it completely. We've already arranged everything." "No," I said, or tried to say. "Your work, your life. Don't disrupt." "Mom, are you serious right now?" Cecily's voice was sharp. "You had a massive stroke. A massive stroke. You can barely talk. You can't move half your body. You're going to need months of intensive therapy. And you think I'm just going to fly back to San Francisco and check in with occasional phone calls? What kind of daughter do you think I am?" "Good daughter. Too good for me." Cecily's eyes filled with tears. "Don't say that." "True," I insisted. "I wasn't there for you after Theo. Always working, never present. Don't deserve your help." "Jesus, Mom." Cecily wiped her eyes. "That's exactly the problem. You always do this. You always manage everything alone. Never need anyone. Never ask for help. Keep everyone at arm's length. Even now, when you literally cannot take care of yourself, you're trying to push me away." She was right. Even now, broken and helpless, my instinct was to protect my independence, to avoid burdening anyone, to handle this alone somehow. "Well, too bad," Cecily continued. "I'm staying. I'm helping. You don't get a vote. For once in your life, you're going to have to let someone take care of you." I started crying again, overwhelmed by her love, by my own unworthiness, by the enormity of what had happened to me. Cecily stood and carefully hugged me, mindful of the IV lines and monitors, and I cried into her shoulder the way I hadn't since Theo died 19 years ago, the way I hadn't let myself cry since then. Because crying meant losing control, and I couldn't afford to lose control. But I'd lost control anyway, lost everything I'd been holding so tight. And maybe, terrifyingly, that was the only way forward. They moved me from the ICU to the acute rehabilitation unit 4 days after the stroke. The rehab unit was less intimidating than intensive care. Brighter, quieter, more focused on recovery than on keeping me alive. But it was still a hospital, still a place where I was utterly dependent on others, still a daily reminder of how completely my life had changed. My room had a window overlooking the parking lot. I would lie in bed for hours, watching people come and go. Walking effortlessly on two functional legs, carrying things with two functional hands, living their normal lives while mine had come to a complete halt. The rehabilitation schedule was brutal. Physical therapy at 9 a.m., occupational therapy at 11, speech therapy at 2, then more physical therapy at 4. Every day, 6 days a week. When I wasn't in therapy, I was supposed to be practicing the exercises, resting to build strength, or working on the homework my therapist assigned. I hated all of it, hated the forced cheerfulness of the therapists, hated the infantilizing equipment, bright-colored balls, large puzzle pieces, simple picture cards, hated the other patients in the therapy gym, many of them elderly, moving through their own recovery with what seemed like grace and acceptance, while I seethed with rage and frustration. My physical therapist was a man named Marcus Turner, not my son-in-law Marcus, which would have been too much irony, but a black man in his early 40s with the build of a former athlete and a no-nonsense approach that initially made me respect him and eventually made me resent him. Our first session was humiliating. He had me try to stand from the wheelchair, supporting myself on parallel bars. My left leg worked. My right leg buckled immediately, sending me lurching sideways. Marcus caught me easily. "Okay," he said, utterly unfazed. "Your right leg doesn't have strength yet, and you've lost proprioception, awareness of where your body is in space. We're going to rebuild that. Try again." I tried again and again and again. Each time, my right leg gave out. Each time, Marcus caught me. By the 10th attempt, I was crying with frustration. "I can't," I gasped. "Can't do this." "You can't do it today," Marcus corrected. "That's different from can't do it ever. This is day 1, Miss Hammond." Recovery takes months. You need to adjust your expectations. "I'm an architect," I said, as if that explained anything. "I design buildings. I manage teams. I run a firm, and I can't stand up." "That's right," Marcus said, completely unmoved by my credentials. "You can't stand up. Not yet. And that's hard for someone who's used to being competent and in control. But recovery isn't about being good at things. It's about being willing to fail repeatedly until gradually you start failing less." His words should have been encouraging, but they just made me angry. Angry at my body for betraying me. Angry at Marcus for his calm competence, angry at myself for being so weak, angry at the unfairness of this whole situation. "I hate this," I said. "I know," Marcus said. "Most people do, but hating it won't make it go away. You can hate it and do the work anyway, or you can hate it and refuse to try. Only one of those options gets you walking again." Occupational therapy was run by a woman named Keisha Washington, petite and energetic, probably in her late 20s, with natural hair pulled back in a colorful head wrap and an endless supply of patient encouragement that made me want to scream. She had me practice picking up objects with my right hand, rubber balls, wooden blocks, plastic cups, tasks a toddler could do. My hand wouldn't cooperate. The fingers wouldn't flex properly, wouldn't grip, wouldn't release. I'd managed to close my fingers around a ball through enormous effort, then couldn't open them to let go. "Great job," Keisha said. "You're starting to get voluntary movement. That's huge progress." "It's pathetic," I muttered. "It's progress," Keisha corrected firmly. "5 days ago, you couldn't move that hand at all. Now you're getting some motor control back. That's not pathetic. That's your brain creating new neural pathways to work around the damage. That's literally your brain rewiring itself. It's remarkable. I wanted to believe her, wanted to see my fumbling attempts as progress rather than failure, but I couldn't. All I could see was how far I'd fallen, how much I'd lost. Speech therapy was somehow worse. My speech therapist was a young woman named Corinne Albright, fresh-faced and earnest, probably right out of grad school. She had me practice simple sounds, work on tongue and lip exercises, repeat basic phrases. "The rain in Spain," I slurred, attempting the classic elocution exercise. "The rain in Spain" was what came out. "Good," Corinne said. "Let's try again, focusing on the sp sound. Put your tongue behind your top teeth." "I'm not a child," I snapped, frustration boiling over. "I have a master's degree. I've given presentations to 100-person audiences. I don't need to practice the alphabet." Corinne was quiet for a moment, then said gently, "I understand this is frustrating, but the stroke affected your brain's language centers. You need to rebuild those neural pathways, just like you're rebuilding the ones for movement. The exercises seem simple because we're starting with the basics, but they're essential." "How long?" I asked, meaning how long until I could speak normally again. "It varies," Corinne said honestly. "Some people recover most of their speech in a few months. Others take longer. Some never fully recover. But the more you practice, the better your chances." Never fully recover. The words echoed in my head. I might never speak normally again, might always sound like this, slurred, impaired, blame damaged. How could I work? How could I present designs to clients? How could I be taken seriously? The answer was, I couldn't. That life was over. Dash stayed for 3 weeks before he had to get back to his teaching job in Portland. He visited every day, bringing me books I couldn't concentrate enough to read, talking to me about his life, his students, his partner Devon, who I'd met exactly once in 7 years. "I'm sorry," I told him one afternoon, "that we're not closer, that I never made time." "Me too," Dash said, "but we can change that. When you're recovered, you should come visit Portland, stay for a while. Actually spend time together." "If I recover." "When," Dash corrected firmly. "When you recover. You're tough, Willie. Tougher than you think. You're going to get through this." But I didn't feel tough. I felt broken, diminished, like everything that had made me who I was had been stripped away, leaving only this damaged show. Cecily stayed. She found a short-term rental apartment near the hospital, postponed her work projects, and became my daily companion, my advocate, my witness to this unraveling. She attended my therapy sessions, learned my exercises, helped me practice. She brought me clothes from home, dealt with my insurance company, managed the endless paperwork. "Why are you doing this?" I asked her one evening after a particularly difficult therapy session. "You have your own life, your work, Marcus." "Because you're my mother," Cecily said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And because for the first time in my life, you actually need me. You're letting me in. That matters." Her words hit hard. She was right. I'd never let her in before. Never showed weakness. Never asked for help. Never allowed her to see me as anything other than competent and controlled. I thought I was being a good mother by being strong, by not burdening her with my own struggles, by showing her that women could be independent and successful. But what I'd actually done was kept her at arm's length, built a wall between us in the name of strength that was really just fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of need, fear of being truly seen. "I'm sorry," I said, tears starting again. The stroke had made me weepy. emotions constantly spilling over in a way I'd never experienced before. I wasn't there for you. After Theo, after he died, I thought being strong was enough, but you needed a mother, not just stability. Theo, my husband, Cecily's father, dead by his own hand 19 years ago when Cecily was 12 and I was 35. And neither of us knew how to talk about the vast, howling grief that opened up in our home. Theo had been brilliant and chaotic, a sculptor whose work was starting to get serious gallery attention, who cycled between manic periods of creative productivity and crushing depressions that terrified us both. I'd been the stable one, the breadwinner, the one who managed the practical details while Theo made art and struggled with his mental illness. When he died, hanged himself in our garage on a sunny Tuesday afternoon while Cecily was at school and I was at a client meeting. I dealt with it the only way I knew how, by working, by being strong, by never ever falling apart in front of Cecily, by providing her with therapy and structure and everything she needed except emotional presence. I'd failed her, failed both of them, failed everyone by choosing control over connection. Yeah, Cecily said quietly, I did need a mother, and you were doing your best with what you knew, but we lost so much time, Mom, so many years of keeping each other at a distance, and I don't want to lose any more. She took my left hand, my functional hand, and held it tight. So I'm here, I'm staying, and you're going to let me help you. Not because you owe me, but because that's what people who love each other do. They show up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I cried, she cried. We sat together in my hospital room and grieved for all the years we'd lost, and maybe started to imagine a different future, if I had a future at all. I was in acute rehabilitation for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of daily therapy that was exhausting and humiliating, and incrementally, frustratingly effective. By the end, I could walk short distances with a walker, could use my right hand for gross motor tasks, though fine motor control remained elusive, could speak more clearly, though I still struggled with complex words and talked more slowly than before. They discharged me with a thick packet of instructions, follow-up appointments, prescriptions, and mornings. Cecily had arranged for modifications to my house, grab bars in the bathroom, a shower chair, a hospital bed installed in my first-floor study, since I couldn't climb stairs yet, ramps over the front steps. She'd also hired a home health aide named Loretta Janes to help with daily care. I don't need someone watching me, I protested, as Cecily drove me home from the hospital. You can't dress yourself yet, Cecily pointed out. You can barely shower with the chair. You need help with medications, meals, exercises. This isn't optional, Mom. I'm 54 years old. I shouldn't need a babysitter. You don't need a babysitter. You need healthcare support. There's a difference. But it didn't feel like a difference. It felt like defeat, like proof that I'd become helpless, diminished, less than what I'd been. Loretta arrived the next morning. A sturdy black woman in her early 60s with short gray hair, warm brown eyes, and an air of unflappable competence. She took one look at me sitting in the hospital bed in my study, still in pajamas at 10 a.m. because I couldn't manage to dress myself, and said, "Okay, baby, let's get you cleaned up and dressed. Then we'll work on breakfast and your morning medications." "I can do it myself," I said reflexively. "Can you?" Loretta asked, not unkindly. "Show me." I tried to stand from the bed using the walker. Nearly fell. Tried to pull my shirt over my head, got tangled in it with my non-functioning right arm. Tried to maintain my dignity while this stranger watched me fail at the most basic tasks of adult life. "That's what I thought," Loretta said. "No shame in needing help, Miss Hammond. Now, let's do this together. I'll assist, but you do as much as you can. Deal? What choice did I have? Those early weeks at home were the darkest period of my life. Darker than the immediate aftermath of Theo's death. Darker than anything I'd experienced. At least after Theo died, I could work, could throw myself into my career and use productivity to avoid feeling. Now, I had nothing to distract me from the catastrophe of my situation. I couldn't work. Tried to review some blueprints Keith emailed me, but I couldn't concentrate. The lines swam on the page. My brain refused to hold the spatial relationships, the calculations, the design principles that had once been second nature. After 20 minutes, I'd have a pounding headache and need to lie down. I tried to respond to work emails, but typing with just my left hand was agonizing slow, and I couldn't trust my word-finding abilities. I'd type facade, and it would come out facade. Simple words would vanish from my vocabulary mid-sentence. I'd give up in frustration after attempting one email for 45 minutes. My house felt like a museum of my former life. Everywhere I looked were reminders of who I'd been. The drafting table in my home office, now pushed aside to make room for the hospital bed. The architectural books lining the shelves. The framed magazine features. The awards and certificates. All artifacts of a person who no longer existed. I spent hours on the couch in my living room. The living room I designed with such care, with its exposed brick wall and minimalist furniture and perfect lighting, staring at nothing, not reading, not watching TV, not doing anything productive, just sitting, existing, waiting for time to pass. Loretta came every morning and evening. She helped me shower, helped me dress, prepared meals I barely ate, made sure I took my medications, supervised my home exercises that I did half-heartedly. She was kind and patient and utterly unimpressed by my sullen resistance. "You're fighting this every step," Loretta observed one morning as she helped me transfer from the bed to the wheelchair we used for longer distances. "Fighting me, fighting your body, fighting reality." "Why?" "Because this isn't who I am," I said bitterly. "I'm not helpless. I'm not dependent. I'm an architect. I run a firm. I'm successful. I couldn't finish. "You're human," Loretta said, "and humans get sick sometimes. Humans need help sometimes. That don't make you less than. It just makes you human." "I don't know how to be human like this." "Then learn," Loretta said simply. "You learned how to be an architect, didn't you? You can learn how to be someone who accepts help, who's patient with herself, who understands that healing takes time." But I didn't want to learn. I wanted to go back, wanted to undo the stroke, undo the decades of stress and overwork that had caused it, undo all the choices that had led me here. Cecily stayed for 2 months, 2 months of daily visits, of accompanying me to outpatient therapy appointments, of helping me practice exercises, of just sitting with me when I was too depressed to speak. She talked about her life, her work, her marriage, filling the silence with the details I'd never taken time to learn before. "Marcus and I are thinking about having kids," she told me one afternoon. "We've been trying for about a year, actually. No luck yet, but we're hopeful." A revelation stunned me. A year they'd been trying, and I hadn't known, hadn't asked, hadn't been present enough in my daughter's life to know she wanted children. "That's wonderful," I managed to say. "You'll be a great mother." "I hope so," Cecily said. "Better than I had, anyway." The words were said lightly, but they landed hard. "I'm sorry," I said for the 100th time. "I should have been better." "Mom, we can't keep having this same conversation. I know you're sorry. I've accepted your apology. Now you need to do something with it. Use this time to actually change, to learn different ways of being in the world. Don't just apologize and then stay stuck in guilt." She was right, but I didn't know how to change. Didn't know who to be if I wasn't Willa the architect, Willa the successful professional, Willa the woman who had everything figured out. Before Cecily left to return to San Francisco, she sat me down for a serious conversation. Mom, I'm worried about you. You're getting physically better. I can see the progress with mobility and speech. But emotionally, you're shutting down. You're depressed. I think you need to talk to someone, a therapist. I'm fine, I said automatically. You're not fine. You barely eat. You don't engage with anything. You sit on the couch all day staring at nothing. That's not fine, and it's not going to get better without help. What's there to say to a therapist? My life is ruined. I can't do my work. I can't take care of myself. Everything I built is gone. Those are just facts. Those are interpretations, Cecily corrected, and pretty catastrophic ones. Yes, things are hard right now. Yes, you've lost things, but you're also alive, you're recovering, and you have people who love you. But you can't see any of that through your depression. Please, Mom, let me help you find someone to talk to. I wanted to refuse, wanted to insist I could handle this myself, the way I'd handled everything else in my life. But I couldn't handle this. I was drowning. And for once, maybe I could accept help. Okay, I whispered. Okay. Part 5, Breaking Open. Dr. Ramona Chen came to my house for our first session. She was a therapist in her late 50s who specialized in trauma and life transitions, and she'd agreed to do home visits given my mobility limitations. She was small and neat, with silver-streaked black hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing simple dark clothes that somehow conveyed both professionalism and warmth. "Thank you for seeing me at home," I said, as Loretta showed her into my living room. "I know that's unusual." "Not as unusual as you might think," Ramona said, settling into the chair across from me. "Many of my clients can't easily leave their homes, particularly right after a major medical event. This is perfectly fine." She spent the first session just getting my history, not just the stroke, but everything before it. My childhood, my family, my marriage to Theo, his death, my relationship with Cecily, my career. I found myself talking more than I'd talked to anyone in years, the words coming more easily as we went on. "Tell me about your life before the stroke," Ramona said. "What was a typical day like?" I described it. Up at 5:15, at the office by 6:30. 12 to 14-hour days. Client meetings, design reviews, site visits, conference calls, eating lunch at my desk while working, staying until 8 or 9 p.m. most nights, going home to my empty house, too wired to sleep, reviewing plans or answering emails until midnight. Weekends at the office or working from home. "What did you do for fun?" Ramona asked. The question stopped me. Fun? I didn't really do fun. I worked. No hobbies, friends, activities outside of work? I shook my head. My work was my life. I had colleagues, professional connections, but not really friends. No hobbies, except maybe reading architecture magazines, which was really just more work. What about relationships? Dating? No. Theo died 19 years ago, and I've been alone since. I told myself I was too busy, too focused on my career. But really, I paused, confronting a truth I'd never quite acknowledged. Really, I was afraid of being vulnerable again, afraid of losing someone again, afraid of anything that might make me feel the way I felt when Theo died. So you chose work, Ramona said. Work is safe. Work is controllable. Work can't abandon you or die or make you feel things you don't want to feel. Yes, I whispered, exactly that. But it sounds like that life wasn't making you happy. Even before the stroke, you weren't fulfilled. You were just existing, going through the motions. I thought about those early morning moments, lying in bed before the day began, feeling nothing but a gray flatness, a sense of meaninglessness I'd been running from my entire adult life. No, I admitted, I wasn't happy. I was busy. I was productive. I was successful by external measures, but I wasn't happy. I'm not sure I even knew what happiness would look like. So let's start there, Ramona said. If you could design your life the way you design buildings, with intention and purpose and care, what would it include? What would make you happy? I had no answer. For someone who'd spent 3 decades creating spaces for others to live and work in, I had no idea how to create a life worth living for myself. I don't know, I finally said. I have no idea. That's okay, Ramona said gently. Not knowing is a valid starting place. Maybe part of your work in therapy will be discovering what actually matters to you underneath all the achievement and productivity. Over the following weeks, Ramona and I met twice a week. She helped me understand that my depression wasn't just about the stroke. It was about the loss of an identity that had never been serving me well in the first place. I'd been miserable before the stroke, just too busy to notice. The stroke hadn't ruined my life. It had revealed that my life was already empty. You've spent 54 years constructing an elaborate facade, Ramona said during one session. A beautiful, impressive facade that everyone admired, but there was no real structure underneath, no foundation of genuine relationships, authentic self-expression, real joy. The stroke didn't destroy that structure. It revealed that there wasn't one to begin with. The insight was devastating and liberating in equal measure. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost nothing real, because nothing about my life had been real. It had all been performance, achievement, proof of worth. But worth to whom? For what? My mother was like this, I found myself saying, emotionally distant, achievement-oriented, never showing vulnerability. She died 5 years ago, and I barely cried. We'd never been close. She'd never really let me know her. So you learned from her that love equals provision, that being a good mother means being competent and successful, but not necessarily present or emotionally available. And I did the exact same thing to Cecily, I said, tears starting, repeated the exact pattern, gave her everything except myself. Cecily's here now, Ramona pointed out. She came when you needed her. She's been present for you in ways you weren't present for her. That suggests she's breaking the pattern. And now you have a chance to break it too, to learn new ways of being in relationship. I cried then, deep, wrenching sobs. Cried for all the years I'd wasted, for all the connection I'd avoided, for all the love I'd been too afraid to accept or give. Cried for my mother, for Theo, for Cecily, for myself. When I finally stopped, exhausted and empty, I felt something shift, some tight knot of control and perfectionism loosening, some possibility opening up. What if I can't go back to architecture? I asked Ramona. What if I never work again? And you'll build a different life, Ramona said simply. One that's maybe smaller in scope, but richer in meaning. One based on who you actually are, rather than what you can achieve. I don't know who I actually am. Then we'll find out together, Ramona said. And maybe that's the real work of recovery, not regaining what you lost, but discovering what was there all along underneath the achievement and the armor. Part 6, Small Lights, 4 months after the stroke. Something unexpected happened. I woke up one morning and wanted to draw, not architectural drawings, not plans or elevations or technical renderings, just draw. For pleasure, for the pure sensory experience of making marks on paper. I hadn't drawn for pleasure since I was a teenager. Once I went to architecture school, drawing became work, a technical skill in service of building design. The joy of it, the meditative quality, the simple pleasure of creating images, all of that had been lost decades ago. But that morning, sitting at my kitchen table with Loretta preparing breakfast, I saw the way light came through the window and fell across the fruit bowl, creating shadows and highlights, and I wanted to capture it, wanted to respond to it visually, wanted to make something. "Loretta," I said, "do you know where my old art supplies are? I think they're in the basement storage room." "Art supplies?" Loretta looked surprised. "You do art?" "I used to, before architecture. Could you help me look?" We found them in a dusty box, old colored pencils, charcoals, sketch pads I bought and never used. The pencils were dried out, but the charcoal was still good. I sat up at the kitchen table with my sketch pad, using my left hand since my right still lacked the fine motor control for drawing. The lines were shaky, uncertain, nothing like the precise technical drawings I'd created for 30 years. But there was something alive about them, something real. "That's beautiful," Loretta said, looking over my shoulder at my awkward sketch of the fruit bowl. "It's terrible," I said, but I was smiling. "But I don't care. It feels good." I drew every morning after that. Still lifes of objects around my house, the view from my window, my own hand. Nothing impressive, nothing technically skilled. Just the simple pleasure of making marks, of responding to what I saw, of creating something without worrying whether it was good enough or professional enough or achieved anything. Cecily called that evening, our daily video chat. "Mom, you look different," she said. "Lighter somehow. I drew today," I told her. "Just sketched some fruit. Nothing special, but it felt good. Really good." "That's amazing," Cecily said, genuine pleasure in her voice. "I didn't know you liked to draw." "I haven't in 30 years, but I remembered today that I used to love it. Before it became work, before it had to accomplish anything, I loved it." "Maybe that's part of recovery," Cecily suggested, "remembering who you were before you became who you thought you had to be." Her words stayed with me. Who had I been before I became Willa Hammond, successful architect? Before I decided that achievement was the only thing that mattered? I'd been Willie, a girl who loved making things, who drew and painted and sculpted, who wanted to create beauty not for professional success, but for the pure joy of it. When had I lost that? When had creativity become just another form of productivity? My outpatient therapy continued. I was getting stronger physically, could walk short distances without the walker now, though I still needed a cane for anything longer. My right hand was improving, though I still couldn't do fine motor tasks like buttoning shirts or writing. My speech was clearer, though I still talked slower than before and struggled with complex vocabulary. But the real changes were internal. I was starting to engage with life again, not just endure it. I joined a stroke support group that met weekly at the hospital. The first meeting, I almost didn't go. Didn't want to sit in a circle with other brain-damaged people and talk about our limitations, but Ramona had encouraged me, and Loretta had driven me, so I went. There were 8 of us, various ages, various levels of impairment, various stages of recovery. A 40-year-old construction worker who'd had a hemorrhagic stroke and was relearning to walk. A 73-year-old retired teacher who'd lost her speech almost entirely. A 68-year-old dentist who'd had to retire because of hand tremors. A 36-year-old software engineer with cognitive impairments. We went around the circle introducing ourselves. When it was my turn, I said, "I'm Willa. I'm 54. I had an ischemic stroke 4 months ago. I was an architect. I don't know if I still am. Why not? Asked the dentist, a woman named Fay Harper. Because I can't work the way I used to, can't concentrate for long periods, can't trust my spatial reasoning, can't draw technical plans with my right hand compromised. What's an architect who can't design buildings? Someone who's more than their job, Fay said. I struggled with that too. I was a dentist for 38 years. My entire identity was wrapped up in that work. When I had to retire, I felt like I died even though my body was still alive. But gradually, I'm learning that I was a person with hobbies and relationships and interests before I was a dentist. I can be that person again. You can too. The construction worker, a man named DeLuca Rossi, laughed bitterly. Easy to say when you had a career that gave you money and status. I did physical labor. My body was my livelihood. Now I can barely walk. I'm on disability. I can't support my family. Who am I if I can't work? You're a father, said the teacher, a woman named Imogen Price, speaking slowly and carefully through her aphasia. You're a husband. You're a person, not just worker. DeLuca's eyes filled with tears. But I don't know how to be just a person. I don't know what that means. None of us do, I said. We all built our identities on what we could do, how we were useful, what we accomplished. And now we have to figure out who we are when we can't do those things anymore. Or can't do them the same way. We sat in silence for a moment, united in our shared loss, our shared confusion, our shared struggle to rebuild lives that looked nothing like what we'd had before. What are you going to do differently? Asked the software engineer, a woman named Enola Briggs. After you recovered as much as you're going to recover, what will you change? It was the question I'd been asking myself for months. What would I change? Everything? Nothing? How do you redesign a life when you don't know what makes a life worth living? I'm going to stop postponing joy, I finally said. I spent 54 years telling myself I'd be happy later, after I got my degree, after I made partner, after I finished this project, after I achieved the next thing. There was always a reason to defer actually living. And then I had a stroke and almost died, and I realized I'd never lived at all. Just worked, just achieved, just postponed. So how do you find joy? Enola asked. When everything hurts and nothing works right and your whole life fell apart. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm starting to. I drew this morning, just a sketch of a fruit bowl, nothing impressive. It brought me joy, real joy, not accomplishment or pride or satisfaction with productivity, just joy. So maybe I start there, one small moment of joy at a time, and see where it leads. After the support group meeting, Fay Harper approached me. Would you want to get coffee sometime? Somewhere accessible, obviously. I've been looking for someone to talk to who understands what this is like. I hesitated. I'd spent so many years avoiding genuine friendships, keeping relationships surface level and professional. But I was trying to change, trying to be open, trying to let people in. I'd like that, I said. We met the following week at a cafe near the hospital with wheelchair-accessible seating and good natural light. Fay arrived early, walking with a cane similar to mine, her right hand tremoring slightly as she lifted her coffee cup. So, she said once we were settled, tell me your story, the real story, not just the stroke. Something about her directness, her lack of social pleasantries, made me trust her. So I told her about Theo, about prioritizing work over everything, about my distant relationship with Cecily, about the emptiness of my supposedly successful life. I designed buildings for 30 years, I said, created spaces for other people to live fully in, but I never learned to live fully in my own life. Fay nodded. I spent 38 years looking into people's mouths. Probably saw 50 patients a week, 2,500 a year. Did the math once. I'd looked into the mouths of over 90,000 people in my career. I knew their dental history better than I knew my own children's lives. Worked 60-hour weeks, missed school plays and soccer games and my daughter's wedding because I had patients scheduled. And for what? The practice replaced me in 3 months. The patients moved on. My kids barely speak to me now. Do you regret it? I asked. Faye was quiet, considering. Yes and no. I loved dentistry. It gave me purpose and identity and financial security. But I regret the cost, the relationships I sacrificed, the moments I missed, the version of myself I never got to explore because I was always working. What version? I asked, curious. The one who paints, Faye said. I always wanted to paint, watercolors, but there was never time. Now I have nothing but time, and my hands shake too much for detailed work. The irony isn't lost on me. We talked for 2 hours, our coffee going cold. Talked about our childhoods, our marriages, our regrets and hopes. I told her about starting to draw again, about the surprise joy of creating without the pressure of professionalism. I want to see your drawings, Faye said. And I want to show you my terrible, shaky attempts at watercolors. Maybe we could work together sometimes. Keep each other company while we figure out who we are now? I'd like that, I said, and meant it. Faye became a real friend, maybe the first I'd had since college. We met twice a week, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at her house or mine. We'd work on our art, her watercolors, my drawings, and talk about everything. Our strokes, yes, but also our lives, our families, politics, books, movies, ideas. Through Faye, I met her friend Saskia Morton, another stroke survivor who'd been an attorney. Saskia was younger, only 49, brilliant and blunt and funny. She'd had a stroke during a trial, collapsed in the courtroom in front of the jury. Best way to lose a case, Saskia joked. Medical emergency mid-cross-examination. Very dramatic. Saskia had left law, unable to handle the cognitive demands, and was now volunteering with a literacy program. I figured if I can't use my brain for high-powered litigation, I can at least help kids learn to read, she said. It's less prestigious, pays nothing, but it's more meaningful than anything I did in 25 years of law. The 3 of us formed an unlikely trio, the architect, the dentist, the attorney. All successful women who'd built their identities on achievement, all brought low by stroke, all trying to figure out who we were in this new, diminished, yet somehow richer life. We should call ourselves the brain-damaged bitches, Saskia suggested one afternoon when we were all together at Faye's house. Saskia, Faye laughed, that's terrible. It's accurate, Saskia said. We all have literal brain damage, and we're all dealing with it by being honest instead of polite. That's badass. We're badass brain-damaged bitches reclaiming our lives. I laughed harder than I had in months, maybe years. There was something liberating about naming the truth so bluntly, about refusing to soften or minimize what had happened to us. We kept the name, at least between ourselves, the brain-damaged bitches, meeting weekly to make art and talk and support each other through the ongoing struggle of recovery. Loretta noticed the change in me. You're different, she observed one morning. Lighter, like some weight you were carrying got lifted. I have friends, I said, surprised by my own delight in saying it. Real friends, people I actually enjoy spending time with, not just professional connections. That's beautiful, Loretta said. Friendship heals, maybe more than medicine sometimes. She was right. The medical interventions were essential, the therapy, the medications, the ongoing monitoring. But it was connection that was actually healing me. Faye and Saskia seeing me, knowing me, accepting me. Cecily calling every day, showing up with a consistency I'd never given her. Even Loretta, who could have been just a hired caregiver, but had become someone I genuinely cared about. Next, part 8, returning to architecture differently. 6 months post-stroke, Keith Caldwell came to visit me at home. My business partner, the man I'd worked with for 22 years, finally making time to see me in person, rather than just occasional phone calls. "Willa," he said, and I saw the shock in his face when he took in my appearance. I gained weight from inactivity and medications. I walked with a cane. My speech was better, but still slow. I looked nothing like the polished professional he'd known. "Keith," I said, gesturing for him to sit. "It's good to see you." We made awkward small talk for a few minutes. Then Keith said, "I wanted to talk to you about the firm, about your partnership." My stomach dropped. Here it was. I was being pushed out. "We want you back," Keith said, "whenever you're ready. The Riverside project broke ground last month. It's going to be spectacular, Willa. Everyone asks about you, wants to know when you're coming back." "I can't work like I used to," I said honestly. "Can't do 80-hour weeks. Can't handle the stress. My cognitive abilities are compromised. I'm not the same architect I was." "Then come back different," Keith said. "Part-time consulting, mentoring younger architects, design review. You don't have to be in the office 12 hours a day to be valuable to the firm." The offer was generous, more generous than I deserved, given how I'd abandoned them. But something in me resisted. "I'm not sure I want to come back," I said slowly, discovering the truth as I spoke it. "I'm not sure architecture is what I want to do anymore. Or at least, not in the way I was doing it." Keith looked stunned. "But you're an architect. That's who you are." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is that just what I did? I'm trying to figure out the difference." After Keith left, I sat with the question. Did I want to return to architecture? The work that had defined me for 3 decades? I thought about the morning light on the fruit bowl, the pleasure of sketching without purpose, the joy of Faye's and Saskia's company, the daily calls with Cecily where we actually talked about feelings and fears and hopes, the sessions with Ramona where I was slowly excavating who I'd been under all the achievement. What if I could do architecture differently? Not as my entire identity, not as something that consumed every hour, but as one part of a richer, fuller life. I called Keith back the next day. What if I came back part-time, 10 to 15 hours a week, design consultation only, no project management, and I'd need to work from home most of the time, come to the office only when absolutely necessary. There was a pause. Then Keith said, "That could work. We'd need to adjust your compensation, obviously, but yes, that could work. And I want to focus on accessible design," I continued, the idea forming as I spoke. "Universal design, spaces that work for people with disabilities. I never thought about it before my stroke, but now I see how many buildings are hostile to anyone with mobility or sensory impairments. I want to change that." "That's actually perfect," Keith said, warming to the idea. "There's increasing demand for accessible design, new regulations coming. You'd be ahead of the curve. This could be a real niche for the firm." We worked out the details over the following weeks. I'd consult on major projects, focusing specifically on accessibility. I'd mentor younger architects. I worked from home primarily, coming to the office once a week for design reviews. It was a fraction of my previous role, a fraction of my previous hours and responsibilities and income. But it felt sustainable, felt like something I could do while also having a life beyond work. My first project back was a public library renovation. I reviewed the plans from my home office, marking up PDFs on my computer since I still couldn't draw technical plans by hand with my right hand impaired. The plans were fine technically, functional, economical, aesthetically pleasant, but they weren't accessible. The entrance had stairs with a ramped access as an afterthought, routed around the back. The restrooms barely met ADA minimums. The circulation desk was too high for wheelchair users. The entire design treated disability as an exception rather than part of the norm. I rewrote the plans, put the ramped entrance front and center, making it the primary entrance, designed generous, well-lit, accessible restrooms with adult changing tables, lowered the circulation desk and created clear sight lines throughout, added quiet rooms for people with sensory sensitivities, incorporated tactile wayfinding for the blind. The young architect on the project, a woman named Petra Volkov, called me after seeing my revisions. "This is brilliant," she said. "I never thought about most of these issues. It's like you redesigned the entire concept." "I'm designing for reality," I said. 26% of adults in the US have some form of disability. That's not a niche market. That's 1 in 4 people. But most architects, most designers, most of the built environment acts like disability doesn't exist or only needs minimal accommodation. I want to change that. "Will you teach me?" Petra asked. "Really teach me how to think this way?" "I'd be happy to," I said. Working with Petra reminded me that architecture can be meaningful in ways I'd forgotten, not just about creating beautiful buildings or winning awards or landing prestigious projects, about actually serving people, meeting real needs, making the world more accessible and humane. I started teaching a seminar at the local university, 1 evening class per semester on accessible design. The students were hungry for it, eager to learn how to design for the full spectrum of human ability rather than some imaginary able-bodied norm. The young architect on the project, a woman named Petra Volkov, called me after seeing my revisions. "This is brilliant," she said. "I never thought about most of these issues. It's like you redesigned the entire concept." "I'm designing for reality," I said. 26% of adults in the US have some form of disability. That's not a niche market. That's 1 in 4 people. But most architects, most designers, most of the built environment acts like disability doesn't exist or only needs minimal accommodation. I want to change that. "Will you teach me?" Petra asked. "Really teach me how to think this way?" "I'd be happy to," I said. Working with Petra reminded me that architecture could be meaningful in ways I'd forgotten, not just about creating beautiful buildings or winning awards or landing prestigious projects, about actually serving people, meeting real needs, making the world more accessible and humane. "You look good, Willie," he said when he arrived at my house. "I mean really good, not just physically, though that too. You seem, I don't know, present, like you're actually inhabiting your life instead of just managing it." "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me," I told him. The flight was difficult. My right leg swelled from sitting, and I needed help getting to the accessible restroom. I was exhausted by the time we landed in San Francisco. But Cecily and Marcus met us at the airport, and seeing Cecily glowing with pregnancy made every moment of difficulty worth it. I stayed for a week, sleeping in their guest room, spending unhurried time with my daughter for the first time since she was a child. We talked, really talked, about everything. Her childhood, my marriage to Theo, his death, years of distance between us, my failures as a mother, her experience of Theo's death, her own journey to become someone different than I'd been. "I was so angry at you for so long," Cecily said one afternoon as we sat in her sunlit living room. "You were there but not there, physically present but emotionally absent. After Dad died, I needed a mother who could hold me while I cried, who could talk about him, who could be vulnerable with me. Instead, I got efficiency and stability, and a parent who never broke down, never showed weakness, never let me see her grief. "I thought I was protecting you," I said. "I thought being strong meant not falling apart in front of you." "But I needed to see you fall apart," Cecily said. "I needed to know it was okay to be devastated, to not have it together, to be a mess. Instead, I learned to lock everything down, to perform competence, to never need anyone. It took years of therapy to unlearn that. I'm sorry," I said. "I was doing the best I could with what I knew, but my best wasn't good enough." I repeated my mother's patterns without even realizing it. "I know," Cecily said, "and I've forgiven you, but I need you to know the impact it had. Not to punish you, but so we can be honest with each other going forward." We cried together, really grieved together, for the first time since Theo died. Grieved for him, for the years we'd lost with each other, for all the ways we'd both been damaged by our family's emotional isolation. "I don't want to repeat these patterns with my child," Cecily said, her hand on her barely showing belly. "I want to be present, emotionally available. I want my kid to know they can need me, that vulnerability isn't weakness." "You will be," I said with certainty. "You already are. You showed up for me when I needed you most. You're breaking the cycle." "We're breaking it together," Cecily corrected. "This grandchild, they're going to have a grandmother who's actually present, who plays with them and draws with them and tells them stories, not a grandmother who's too busy with work to notice them." The promise terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I would be a grandmother. I would have another chance to love someone without the armor, without the distance, without the fear. Before I left San Francisco, Cecily and I went to the ocean. It was difficult. The walk from the parking lot exhausted me, and I had to sit frequently on the benches along the path. But eventually we made it to the beach, where I stood with my cane planted in the sand, watching the waves crash and retreat, feeling the salt spray on my face. "Dad loved the ocean," Cecily said quietly. "I think about him every time I come here." "Me too," I said. "I think about him differently now. Before the stroke, I just felt guilty. Guilty that I hadn't saved him, hadn't seen how bad his depression was, hadn't been enough to keep him alive. But now I understand that his illness wasn't about me. I couldn't have loved him into wellness. I could only have loved him, which I did, imperfectly but genuinely." "Do you think he'd be proud of you?" Cecily asked. "Of how you're rebuilding your life?" I thought about Theo. Wild. Creative, uncontained Theo, who'd always chafed against my need for control and order. Who'd loved me anyway, loved my daughter fiercely, made beautiful art, even as he struggled with demons I couldn't fight for him. "I think he'd be relieved," I said. "He used to tell me I was suffocating under all my control, that I needed to let go, make messes, allow for chaos and beauty and spontaneity. I never listened. I thought his way led to destruction. And for him, maybe it did, but maybe there was a middle path I couldn't see then. Not his chaos or my control, but something else, something more human." "I think you're finding that path now," Cecily said, taking my hand. We stood there together, mother and daughter, watching the waves, carrying our dead beloved with us in memory, preparing to welcome new life. The ocean was vast and indifferent and beautiful, continuing its ancient rhythm regardless of human suffering or joy. There was something comforting in that, the world's refusal to stop for our catastrophes, the persistence of beauty even in loss. It's been 3 years since my stroke. I'm 57 now, living a life I never could have imagined during those early dark months of recovery. I work 10 hours a week consulting on accessible design. It's enough to feel useful, to contribute my expertise, to mentor younger architects. But it's not my identity anymore. It's just something I do, one part of a much larger life. I draw almost every day, still just sketches, nothing professional. But the practice brings me steady joy. Faye and Saskia and I still meet weekly. We call ourselves the Resilience Circle now, instead of the brain-damaged bitches, though we use both names depending on our mood. Cecily had a daughter 6 months ago, Zora Theodora Chen, named for Zora Neale Hurston and for Theo. I flew to San Francisco when she was born, held my tiny granddaughter in my arms, and felt something crack open in my chest that had been closed since Theo died, maybe since long before that. I visit once a month now, stay for a week at a time, help with feedings and diaper changes and the countless small tasks of caring for an infant. Cecily and Marcus are exhausted and overwhelmed and happier than I've ever seen them. And I'm present, really present, in a way I never was when Cecily was a baby. Zora doesn't know about my stroke, doesn't know I'm disabled. To her, I'm just grandma, the person who holds her and sings to her and draws silly pictures of animals to make her smile. The person who shows up, who stays, who loves without conditions or distance. I still use a cane. My right hand still doesn't have full dexterity. I talk more slowly than I used to, and I get tired easily. I have limitations that will probably never fully resolve, but I've stopped seeing these as pure losses. They're also the cracks that let the light in, the breaking that allowed me to be remade. Ramona and I still meet monthly. I'm not in crisis anymore, but therapy has become part of how I maintain my life rather than fix it. We talk about relationships, about sustaining joy, about navigating the smaller challenges that arise in this slower, more intentional life I'm building. "Do you miss your old life?" Ramona asked me during our last session. I thought about it honestly. Did I miss the 80-hour weeks, the constant stress, the impressive projects, the professional recognition? Did I miss being senior partner Willa Hammond, award-winning architect, featured in magazines and admired by peers? No, I said, surprising myself with the certainty. I thought I would. I thought I'd grieve that life forever. But I don't miss it. I miss the idea of it, the fantasy that all that achievement would eventually make me happy. But the actual life, the emptiness underneath the impressive facade, I don't miss that at all. "What do you have now that you didn't have then?" Ramona asked. "Everything that matters," I said. "Real friendships, a genuine relationship with my daughter, time to draw, to read, to walk in the park and notice the light on the trees, lunch with Loretta, where we actually talk instead of her just being my employee, Sunday phone calls with Dash where we tell each other true things about our lives." It sounds sappy, but I have connection. I have presence. I have myself. I paused, then added, "The stroke didn't ruin my life. It revealed that my life was already empty and gave me the chance to fill it with something real. I wouldn't wish a stroke on anyone. The suffering, the loss, the difficulty is genuine and ongoing. But for me, it was also a doorway to a smaller life that's actually mine, to relationships that are real, to joy that isn't postponed but present. Last week, I was at a coffee shop with Faye when a young woman approached our table hesitantly. She was in her late 20s, professional clothing, tired eyes. "Excuse me," she said. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I heard you mention architectural design, and I looked you up on my phone. You're Willa Hammond. I studied your work in school. The Riverside development is one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever seen." For a moment, I felt the old pull, the pride, the validation, the proof of worth through achievement. But then I looked at this young woman with her exhaustion and her need for external validation, and I saw myself at her age. "Thank you," I said. "That project nearly killed me, actually. Literally. I had a stroke from the stress of it while it was still in development." She looked shocked. "I'm so sorry, but the building, it's still brilliant." "The building is fine," I said gently, "but it wasn't worth my health, wasn't worth what I sacrificed for it. If I could go back, I'd design something less ambitious and spend more time with my family. I'd create a sustainable practice instead of a prestigious one. I'd remember that buildings are just buildings, but life is precious and finite." The young woman looked confused, maybe a little disappointed that I wasn't giving her the validation she was seeking. "My advice, if you want it," I continued, "is to decide now what kind of architect you want to be. One who designs impressive buildings at the cost of her well-being and relationships, or one who does good work within a balanced, sustainable life. You can't have both, despite what everyone tells you. The industry will take everything you're willing to give. You have to decide how much that is." She thanked me and laughed, and I don't know if my words meant anything to her. Probably not. She'll have to learn these lessons herself, the way we all do. But I'd said them anyway, offered the truth I'd learned too late. Faye squeezed my hand across the table. "Look at you, being all wise and honest." 3 years of therapy will do that," I said with a laugh. But it wasn't just therapy. It was the stroke breaking me open. It was Cecily showing up. It was Dash staying those first weeks. It was Loretta's patient care. It was Ramona's guidance. It was Faye and Saskia's friendship. It was choosing again and again to be vulnerable instead of descended, to be present instead of busy, to be real instead of impressive. It was learning, finally, at 57 years old, how to come home to myself. Tomorrow, I'm flying back to San Francisco to spend 2 weeks with Cecily and Zora. I'll hold my granddaughter, help my daughter, draw in the mornings while everyone sleeps. I'll move slowly, rest when I'm tired, accept my limitations without shame. I'll live my small, precious life with my imperfect body and my recovered brain and my opened heart. And I'll be, for the first time in 5 decades, genuinely happy. This is the story of how I came undone and came home. How catastrophe forced me to confront the emptiness underneath my achievements. How loss became the doorway to a life actually worth living. I wouldn't recommend having a stroke as a path to self-discovery. The suffering is real. The losses are genuine, the difficulty ongoing. But I will say this, sometimes we build such elaborate facades, such impressive but hollow structures, that nothing less than complete collapse will reveal what's missing. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought defined us to discover who we actually are. I am Willa Beatrice Hammond. I am 57 years old. I am a recovering perfectionist, a part-time architect, a grandmother, a daughter, a friend, an artist, a stroke survivor, a woman who is learning, finally, to live. And that is enough. More than enough. It is everything.